Our next speaker is John Harley, Executive Director at GemServe. We're going to be speaking on priorities and practicalities for reforming energy code systems and governance. John.
Thank you, and it's great to be here this morning. So GemServe have been involved in energy code governance as a code administrator and a code manager for over 20 years. We've governed the smart energy code, electricity codes, metering codes, and now with Deloitte and Capgemini, we're successful in a new way for codes under the retail energy code services. And it's in that capacity that I'm talking today, looking at the priorities and practicalities for reforming energy systems and governance. And there's two parts to what I want to talk about: why governance needs to change, and that's from a perspective of an organization who has run governance for 20 years. And then an example of how governance can be better. And I'm going to use the example of what we've done over the last 9 months in the retail energy code, what you can expect come the 1st of September when it goes live, and why that's a blueprint, I think, for better governance in the future. So next slide, please. And one again. So I've got a really common theme here with Mark in terms of the changes that are happening in the energy sector. If you look at the blue boxes on the bottom, the way that the sector operated, at least in the last 20 years, longer actually, was that there was a clear separation between organisations or parts of organisations who did generation, transmission, distribution and supply. So the governance and regulation was all predicated on the separation of those particular areas. And as code bodies, we were able to support the industry in terms of their obligations in relation to distribution codes or supply licenses and member codes that came off the back of that. But in a world where we're becoming more multi-directional, where we're becoming more flexible, where new business models want to do the all of them, maybe at a local level or a city level, rules, governance, regulation need to change, because all that's going to happen is that it's going to be too complex to make the changes that need to be made. And the technology will supersede the regulations. And if the regulations don't support it, there's risks to consumers inherently as a part of that. So if we move on to the next slide, this is our assessment. You may agree or disagree in terms of where we are. One, in where the market is heading, and two, where we are now. I'm going to pick out a couple of areas. I think data is incredibly important. We've got a real challenge to get to the nirvana, as Mark puts it, of big data. Primarily, that's because we have separate systems, and just like distribution, transmission, supply was separated, the way that we've built our systems in the energy industry to support the governance and regulation has been very separate. It's been to do a particular job at a particular time, and there hasn't been the ability to integrate those systems optimally. So we need to move to a situation where, if we've got a more decentralized energy market, flexible, integrated systems need to be able to talk to each other. And of course, technology now is able to do that. The other element of change I don't think we've moved far enough on at the moment is this kind of move from prescriptive regulation to easier, when you've got one set of things that you need to do in one part of the market, to principle-based regulation. Principle-based regulation gives you the opportunity to allow companies different business models, to help them with derogation to the rules for the good of moving forward in the market. And I think that's a particular area that we're focusing on moving forward as we go into the next phase of the energy transition. Next slide, please. So this slide, I'm not going to talk about the figures, but over the last 20 years, we've had a lot of conversations with investors. I took these stats from, I think, Reuters and Bloomberg a couple of years ago. the challenge we've always had, particularly in the green space, the decarbonisation space, is investors don't want to invest if they don't think the governance and the regulation is right, because inherently that causes risk. If market participants are going to fail customers, then investment is going to be curtailed. So there's a huge responsibility for regulators. There's a huge responsibility for code bodies such as ourselves to make sure that we support the market, to enable them to meet their obligations, to support investors to put money into the market. Next slide. And if we get it right, I think with the foundation of good governance, obviously we've got over 1,000 potential energy disruptors in the market, and I truly believe that foundation of governance, that foundation of regulation, is the key to opening up the ongoing development of innovation. Next slide. Thank you. So we've started the journey, in particular with the Retail Energy Code. And if you just go to the next slide, we recognised over recent years that the existing way of working in a code governance space was not meeting the expectation of customers. We realised that rapidly developing next generation digital capabilities could actually expedite that change. So we had to think about the parallel evolution of regulatory change and how digitalisation supported that change. I think it's critical to note and important to note that Ofgem recognises its central roles in driving that digital change, and RECCO in its strategic vision puts digital first at the heart of the code that they're responsible for. So last year they commissioned a one code manager service. So ourselves, GemServe, leading the professional services, Capgemini, the technical services, and Deloitte, the performance assurance, were procured and have been working together to get ready for the 1st of September. And we've got the first set of digital tools being implemented in the next couple of months. Next slide. So how do we go about that journey? How do you go about turning the analog governance into digital governance in the course of 9 months? We set out very clear digitalisation principles, a digital first experience, digital delivery being the norm, not the exception. So every process we've designed has been designed to be done digitally. Secure by design, flexible, integratable platform. And that's a great advantage of where technology is. You've got the ability to link best in breed technologies through APIs into the way that we run the governance, and the maximization and value of data. And I talked earlier about the challenge we've got with the systems that we've got in the market at the moment in terms of the move to big data. We've got an example here and an opportunity here to maximize that. And there's two immediate platforms, and actually we can go to the next slide because I cover them in brief there. I'm conscious of time. We've got the energy markets architecture repository that Capgemini are responsible for. It's the digital twin of the Retail Energy Code. So what it does is it stores digital representation of all code components in a modeling tool that allows analysis and modeling of the code. So the purpose of that, removing impediments to market entry to let innovators in, accelerating the introduction of new energy services from innovators, creating a more flexible market model, and improving scope and quality of change and the impact assessment of change. The REC portal, GemServe will deliver on the 1st of September, and that's to provide efficient access to the Retail Energy Code and the supporting services. It's a digital gateway for all users to use to interact with the Retail Energy Code. So in relation to committee management, change management, party management, it will all be done through one central digital platform, and that will improve engagement and expedite change as well. So next slide. The key kind of in practical terms of what that means to new retail governance is that becoming a REC party should be easier, it should be quicker, we should reduce the burden of access to the market. change proposals which need to be quicker than they are now, will be quicker with the solutions and technology that we've got to be able to analyze change, prioritize change, and push change through. And derogation will be run through digital platforms as well to enable variations from the regulations to be able to work alongside organizations who are more equipped to deal with the regulations that are in place. So there's a step change in code governance, and thank you to the Retail Energy Code for sharing, allowing us to share those slides on behalf of the code manager. And that's all from me.